Higher, longer, the new transitory inflation. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Insights, brought to you by Ainslie Bullion and the Gold and Silver Standard. Today, welcome back Alex, who's taken us on a wide-ranging discussion in today's news piece, covering everything around inflation, from oil prices to debt levels, through to employment and savings. So much to cover. How are you going today, Alex?
I'm going very well. How are you today?
Very, very well indeed. So we were just having a little bit of a discussion before this, and there was a lot in the news today that was something that you were passionate about, that I was passionate about. So let's just start off with that idea of what you mean by this term higher, longer, and why it caused you to be so passionate about the news today.
Well, I'm just a little bit sick of hearing higher, longer from every central banker going. And I keep asking people, where do you think, the gold market's going? Where do you think interest rates are going? Bonds are going? Everyone says higher, longer. Then I ask why. It's oil. It's unemployment. It's this. Everyone has swallowed the central bank Kool-Aid again, just like they did on transitory. And after 28 months later of transitory inflation, I think we now need to talk about the new buzzword, which is higher, longer from central banks, which makes no sense to me anymore. Just like transitory, I remember speaking to you about that way back.
Yep.
It made no sense. It was never transitory. They had huge monetary stimulus on top of huge fiscal stimulus. It was never going to be transitory. But we are coming to some sort of end now, and higher, longer is not an end. Higher, longer is kind of more of the same rhetoric, and the world has changed.
Yep. No, that's fair. So let's dig into one to start off with that you specifically mentioned, which is oil. So you just mentioned that there. And you definitely did paint a somewhat contrarian picture in what you wrote today compared to other people that I'm reading that are exactly what you said, making that higher, longer argument. So what's your sort of take specifically on oil?
All right. So oil, we did something on the SPR the other day, which we talked about why it probably spiked oil prices, because every time the US says we're going to refill the SPR, OPEC cuts its production. But actually look at what's going on in the world. Ignore America and ignore all the signs they like to give OPEC as to what to do to, stimulate oil prices, which benefit the US greatly. China is recording month-on-month negative PPI. So last month it was at 4.4%. Germany on Friday recorded a negative 6% PPI. So you've got the rest of the world slowing down quickly. So inputs for all of the goods that are being manufactured overseas are falling at huge rates, and the amount that is being imported is falling. Now, oil is not its own beast. Oil is part of that. Oil makes plastic, oil for the cars. All of this is slowing down. So set that aside for a second and say the rest of the world is going to need less oil very soon. Well, the US is actually oil self-sufficient. It doesn't need oil. There's 12 million barrels they're producing a day. It's all they need. I think it's about 1 million more than what they need a day. So they're fine. So if the US economy is rip-roaring and they need oil, they've got oil. The rest of the world is slowing down. That is not bullish for oil. And let's be really honest from here, Ukraine war is more likely to end than start. And that was the shock to oil. And that shock cannot happen again. It can only go the other way.
And that's a fair point, that if we see the pressure really coming off, you've got obviously less pressure for the price of oil to rise anyway. But we also have to remember that a lot of supply was taken off the table because that's what OPEC does, right? Like when the prices were falling, they removed supply, and they would be probably pretty keen to pump that supply back in if the prices started taking off again as well. So there's a few angles you could approach that with that are really not overly bullish for oil.
Yeah. And, it's just one of this rhetoric that everyone keeps saying higher, longer. Oil's going up.
Yep.
Food is going up. We know food's going to go up. You've got all the, you've got hurricane in California at the moment. You've got floods everywhere. Food will definitely go up, but oil is not the one that I think everyone should be looking at the moment.
Yep. So turning slightly from that to the US rates and the debt situation, definitely one that sparks a lot of attention from both of us that we're really looking closely at. How do you see that playing in here?
So US debt now, the world clock, everyone should look at the world clock because it's just so much fun to watch. 32.7 trillion. So I think at the beginning of the year where we had about 31 trillion, I can't even remember. It's
growing rapidly. Yes. You watch it there and you try to keep up with little numbers ticking over. They're very, very quick.
So you've got the bond market now collapsing because, as you know, as interest rates go up, bond prices go down. Yep. So, and then you've got the US issuing more and more bonds at depreciating prices. So no one's really looking to buy them. Their interest bill has gone from 500 billion at the beginning of the year. It's now sitting at 1 trillion. And at 5% interest rate on 32.7 trillion, that is 1.7 trillion. So as the older bonds, the COVID bonds at 0% roll off and they're replaced by these 5% bonds, the US could be looking at around $2 trillion in interest expenses at current rates. They cannot afford it. So for your mortgage, my mortgage, that's obviously gone up with interest rates, but so's the government's debt. And they're getting to the point where this is insane. They cannot afford this.
Should we go for a little venture into my chart, sort of to follow that up? Now, this is, I'll just warn the audience here that we don't usually venture to live charting, but I'm going to give it a go. So bear with me, and hopefully this works. We did trial it before, so hopefully you can all see that on the chart, on the screen there. And this is a chart that I've put together just to really highlight what Alex was just talking about, where we've got this white line here, which is the government debt, and you can see it's up there at 32 trillion, or rapidly, a higher number, approaching 33 trillion, really. But what I mapped here were the bond yields for, you can see a whole lot of different bond ranges. So 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20, 30. And what was really interesting about that, so the red one there is actually the 1 year bond yield currently at 5.4%. But then when you look at the 10 year down here at 4.3 and the 30 year at 4.45, what the discussion we were just having before we sort of recorded this was, these numbers actually need to be, at the moment they're negative. You're not getting paid really a premium to take on that term risk. Really, these numbers need to be above or up around the 6% level or even higher. And that has huge implications for the market, because we're trying to issue
trillion goes even higher for longer.
That's right. And if you're trying to issue more debt into that environment, it's going to push those rates higher, which pushes bond prices lower. And there's just massive flow-on consequences for all of that.
Yeah, so you've got China and Japan dumping bonds. No one's buying them. So, and the other thing we were talking about was just the US dollar and how it looks like it's starting to disconnect from bond yields, because bond yields are going up and the DXY, look, it may keep going up for a little bit, but it's starting to disconnect. As those yields go up, the US dollar is not going up as much as it was. So people are starting to price risk of US dollar in more, and that seems apparent. So unless that flips, if that flips, the US can't afford it. And if you've got this thing where the US dollar disconnects from bonds, there's no inflation hedge for the US. So, these bond prices, the inflation just continues to rise, bonds keep collapsing, and the US dollar, can't go up to compensate for it, to try and pull the inflation back down.
And that's a situation, like we've referred to it as the inflation coming home to roost, because people that I spoke to from the US never really understood why we were so angry about the strong US dollar through that sort of later half of last year and early this year, where it was really creating a problem because we had high inflation, but they were going, what are you talking about? It's fine here. And I actually think you brought it together really well in a great example about Argentina that you used in the news today, where you sort of made an observation I hadn't really heard anywhere else, but made a lot of sense to me. So could you maybe just talk to us about that? Because I think it's related to this example.
So I was out at dinner with a girlfriend the other night, and we were talking. She used to live in Argentina, and she was telling me about her friends. And she said they are just going out every night. They are just partying because their inflation's at 103%. So they just are spending it knowing they're not going to have it. So if I've got it now, I need to spend it now.
Yep.
So, and yesterday's article from Ainslie was about the US COVID savings having disappeared. They've gone from 2.2 trillion to negative 100 billion, and much faster than anyone else thought. Now, if you think your dishwasher is going to cost $100 more at the end of the year, you just go and spend your money now. So all of those savings that were saved up that were a great buffer to go forward have been spent. That increases inflation because you've got more people competing for the same goods. But now it's gone. So where does it go from here? It is not inflationary from here. That is disinflationary. It is not higher longer. There is no money to spend on goods unless there's more debt, and that's either personal or government.
And that really aligns with what I've been thinking recently, that we could cop this quite badly until you get some sort of pivot, whether that is, and I suppose that aligns with the graph we were showing before. You either need, there's only two ways to solve that problem, where either rates need to go much higher, which creates almost a doom loop, because then you've got so much debt that needs to be refinanced at much higher rates, creates a problem for much longer, or the rates need to come down. And we haven't heard anything from the Fed indicating that they're keen to do that in any sort of hurry, but it's a real problem that that's going to be front and center very soon, I suspect.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that, and last night, like I said, the USD disconnected slightly from bonds. If that disconnects, there's almost no way out of it. So they're going to have to try and pull this back pretty quickly. And to be honest, the only way to do that is to drop interest rates. There isn't a way around it. You can't let the interest rates go up, or you get the Fed buying bonds again, because they're obviously a net seller. And
that's we're back in money printer go burr. We're back in the quantitative easing, the potentially some form of yield curve control, all these things that really got us in the problem in the first place. So it's not an optimal solution, is it?
It's not an optimal solution, but all these central banks like China lowered their interest rates, Japan's yield curve controlling. Germany's got negative PPI, but they're not the euro, they're just Germany. Yep. America has the Fed doing what they want to do. There are so many different situations right now. For anyone to tell you higher, longer with any conviction is absolutely ridiculous, because there are too many extremes in too many markets right now, and they're not small markets. It's not Argentina anymore. It's Japan, it's Europe, it's China, it's the US. Yep. And everybody needs a different outcome right now. So, they can only as they all push their weight around with what they're going to do, it's just going to create bigger and bigger extremes.
That all makes a lot of sense and is all a little bit scary, but also, it's interesting times. We're definitely living in interesting times. So thank you for that today, Alex.
Thank you. It was really good today, just tying it all together, because we've spoken about all of them as individual things, and people actually just need to look at the data and stop like the labor market, take into account disability. It is not unemployment levels that they said. It's just not.
No.
It's just a way of moving numbers to make everything look rosy. Some countries do it, some countries don't, and it paints a really grey picture.
And it's great, exactly like you just said, to put it together, and that's really valuable. So we appreciate you taking the time to do that for us.
It's fun.
Thanks everyone for watching. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, reach out on those social platforms so we can have a look at those. Really appreciate that. That's us for today. We'll be back tomorrow with Brainco to discuss all things markets and metals. Until then, have a great rest of the day, everyone.